Good morning, everybody. This is Miss Klink again, and as you can see, the purpose of this video is to talk to you about what it means to make inferences. So this is actually something that we do a lot in real life without even realizing it. So when you make inferences, you're really looking at a few things. You can make inferences by looking at a person's body language, what their facial expressions are showing. But also we want to practice being able to make inferences within texts. So what does it mean to make an inference? Well, the thing I like to think about is you're really being a reading detective. When you make an inference, you're looking at what is not directly stated. So what is the author trying to tell you by not telling you exactly what they mean? So that, I know that sounds kind of confusing, but basically what you need to know is think about what does it mean to be a detective? Well, detectives look for clues. That would be the text clues. That would be what is the character saying or what's the character acting like. Those would be text clues. And then not all inferences can be made. Maybe not, text clues aren't always going to be enough information. So we also have to think, what's my background knowledge? So what do my life experiences tell me? Can I relate a text to a situation I've experienced in my own life? So inferences really make you think a lot harder about what's not directly being stated. What's the author not telling us that we have to figure out? So sometimes we can look at pictures and really, I'm sure you've heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, obviously when we look at pictures, we don't look for text evidence. We want to make inferences based on our background knowledge. So here's a few pictures that I took of my dog Sadie, and we are going to practice making inferences about maybe what her current mood is. So how is she feeling right now? So if I'm going to look at this first picture. So this is basically her in the same position, except for obviously the picture is taken from two different angles. So if I look at this first picture right here, well, what do I notice? What are some clues? I notice that she is in a blanket. So she's in a blanket. I also notice that her head's down. It's not up. And really, those things are happening. She's also in a blanket right here, and her head is down here. The third major clue I see is that her nose is buried underneath the blanket, so you can't really see it. So as you can see, I put all of these clues into a blue magnifying glass right here. So based on these clues, I can infer that my dog is asleep. And I can also infer that she is tired. So let's take a look at this next example. So if you've heard of Garfield, I used to read him all the time. His comics are really funny. The main characters are usually John, who's right here, and Garfield, the cat. Sometimes Odie the dog is in here, but he's not in this one. So let's just see what inferences we can make from this cartoon. So we notice in the first picture, John is staring open-eyed at a bowl. And then in the second one, he says, "This entire bowl of cheese puffs has vanished. And I bet I know where they went." So he's kind of looking, you notice his eyes are looking behind him. And then he yells, "Garfield! Show me your paws." So in the bottom, look at John's eyes. We can infer that John is very angry. Well, of course, we can infer that before in the pictures before. So Garfield holds open his paws, and then John says, "They're already orange." Notice Garfield's face. He's smiling and he's thinking the perfect crime. So let's talk about this. So why do you think that John thinks he knows where the cheese puffs went? Well, if I look for clues, I can think of some background knowledge about Garfield. I know that Garfield, first of all, number one, loves lasagna and really just loves to eat food in general. And that's usually a common theme among Garfield comics. But if you didn't know that information about Garfield or you'd never read about him, let's look for text clues. So as we can see, there's no other person around, so that would be a clue. And the only other creature that shows up is the cat. So based on what I see here, that John is the only person and Garfield is the only animal around, that helps me to infer that he's the only possible suspect. Now, why does John ask Garfield to show him his paws? Well, we can infer that since Garfield has shown in the past that he likes to eat, well, obviously he would be picking up the food with his paws. I know that real cats don't do that, but in comics they can do the same things humans do. So he wants to show him his paws because he wants to have proof that he's taken John's cheese puffs. And what does Garfield mean when he says the perfect crime? Well, if you notice, what is John saying right here in this last box? So it says they're already orange. So I can see, well, I know that cheese puffs are orange. And I know that Garfield's fur is orange. So if it's the perfect crime, if Garfield took the cheese puffs, you wouldn't be able to tell very much because it would kind of blend in with the color of his fur since they're the same color. So let's check out these. There's a few little poems in a way. They're kind of set up like poems, but let's read them. It says, "You can plant me, you can pick me, I grow on a stalk, you can eat me on the cob, or eat flakes of me for breakfast, you can pop me." So I'm going to look for my clues. Well, I know it's something I can plant. It's something I can pick, so I can maybe pick it out of the ground. I grow on a stalk. A stalk is a really good clue. You can eat me on the cob, so it's something that comes on a cob. You can also turn it into flakes for breakfast. And you can pop me. Well, I can put all these clues together, and I know that we're talking about corn. So as you can see, I put the me equals corn, and I wrote down all my clues. Now, I know we already marked them in the text, but it's super important to write them down all together, because if you see them all in the same area, it's a lot easier to see why the inference would be that we're talking about corn. So let's check this one out. We have, I hang out in schools. Okay, so maybe it's talking about kids. Sleep with my eyes open. Well, obviously that's not kids because we sleep with our eyes shut. My favorite game is Name That Tuna. Okay, I have fins and gills. Well, this is pretty obvious right here, But I'm going to read the last clue. And I can breathe underwater. Well, definitely. So if we put all these clues together, well, I can see fish. And it fits with every single one because fish swim in schools. They don't close their eyes when they sleep. And the last three clues are definitely of what really tells us that this means we're talking about a fish. So yet again, I went ahead and wrote my inference, the my or the I, in this case is a fish, and I wrote all my clues together because, like I said before, it's a lot easier to show why the my is fish because you're putting all your clues in the same general area. It's a lot easier to see. So it's also important to look at texts like paragraphs because they're going to be a little bit more challenging. So if we look at this first, number 3, up at the top, it says, "My mom picked up the milk and eggs from the freezer. She pushed the cart with my baby sister in it and went through the checkout line." I had to figure out, this looked like a 2-part question, so number 1, where's my mom? And number 2, how do you know? Well, I'm not going to make an inference yet. I'm going to look for my clues. So I know, let's see, if she picked up milk and eggs from the freezer. She was pushing a cart. Let's see here. And her baby sister, or his baby sister, was in it. And she was in a checkout line. So I'm going to write down my clues at the bottom. So if I look at all these clues that I wrote down at the bottom, the milk and eggs from freezer, pushed a cart, and checkout line, I can definitely infer that my mom was at the grocery store. And how do you know? I'm just going to put an arrow down here. I wanted a little bit more space because I knew I couldn't fit all my proof next to that little line right there. So number 4 over here says, "It was very quiet when James walked inside. He returned the books in the return items drawer and went to the children's section. He checked out 2 books and left with his parents." So again, where is James and how do you know? So let's see. I notice it's very quiet and it's something that's inside. So I know James returned the books in return items drawer. He went to a children's section, checked out 2 books, and left with his parents. So I'm going to write down my clues really quickly. So as you can see at the bottom, I went ahead and wrote down all my clues. And so if I look at the clues, it says very quiet, return books, children's section, checked out 2 books. Well, now that I see them all in the same spot, I can infer that James is at the library. And of course, how do I know? Well, all my text evidence is written at the bottom. So I say the big things you need to know about making an inference is they're clues from a text, and they're also based on background knowledge, and they're not directly stated, so the author doesn't come out and say, "Hey, this is exactly what I want to tell you." So if you ever want to be a detective or have a dream of being a detective, inferences, that's definitely going to be your jam. So I hope this helped, and we'll talk to you later.